What's happening, everybody? We have some big cannabis legalization news today. We're going to do a deep dive into intoxicating hemp derivatives, including THCO, Delta-8 THC, THCP, THC, HHC. Some people think that they're legal. I'm going to explain to you why no, they are not legal. In the case of Tanya Anderson versus Diamondback Investment Group, LLC, this person, Elizabeth Martineau, she's going to get a call from me tomorrow. I'm going to ask her if she raised the absurd result principle. Also, if she raised a litany of federal acts that say you're not allowed to put unregulated stuff into the food supply, for example, THCO or HHC, that's not how it works, but it is a very easy and simple understanding of our federal laws where you just look at the definition of hemp, which is what they would call vague. I don't know if it's unconstitutionally vague enough, but typically, and I have the definition of corn syrup and corn that we'll go over to illustrate that. You're going to want to tune in, stick around. Let's get into it. I should stop getting into Twitter wars on LinkedIn with owners of large hemp conglomerates, but they don't have to follow the rules. And so I kind of like to tell them that what they're doing is not legal. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm a little heated today. If you're joining us and you're a legalizer and you've joined the channel, thank you so much, by the way. If this is your first rodeo here, don't forget to give us a like, a subscribe, and tune back in for all of our other very interesting things and our weekly podcast of cannabis legalization news. Miggy is camping today, so we're going to do a truncated, very dense, nerdy version of this all about hemp. If you are all about hemp, you're committing many crimes and you don't even know it. But like, subscribes, and let's dive into this case that came out. It was reported out of numerous sources. Marijuana Moment actually had the main story. It is the case from the Fourth Circuit. This came out, this opinion: THCO qualifies as legal hemp under federal law because the appeals court probably didn't have all the facts and evidence before them. That's not accurate. To say that something is hemp, that may be accurate, but that doesn't mean that you're allowed to put it in the food supply, because it would still be an adulterated product, as it is not generally regarded as safe, also known as grass, under FDA regulations, which there aren't none. There are no FDA regulations for hemp. One of the funniest aspects of reading this long opinion, which is right here, just this long 49-page opinion, has to do with the Looper case. They do mention a Looper case in here, mentioning it because the Looper case overturned the Chevron doctrine that gave deference to professional opinions from the administrative wing that is the DEA, or in this instance, the FDA. That did not happen. They make reference to, even if the DEA's opinion letters from 2023 regarding the legality of THCO mattered, the court didn't have to give it deference because the Chevron doctrine no longer exists. What else doesn't exist? Federal regulations for hemp consumption. It is not generally regarded as safe, which means that if you put it into the food supply for human consumption, whether that's inhalation or ingestion, you are committing a crime. I wrote an article. I do cite Adulterated, and that does come up several times, and I have the cite to it. There it is. Generally regarded as safe is in 21 USC section 321S, and an adulterated food product is under 21 USC 342. So all of these hemp companies are violating that federal law. I really wish I could go in front of this judge. What was his name? This was Judge Diaz, Niemeyer, and Richardson. I don't know if any of them had this brought to their attention, that THCO, while maybe considered hemp, is still an adulteration, because there are no FDA regulations that say it can go into the food supply. That is a big problem with my understanding of this ruling. And that gets before the absurd result principle of why on earth would Congress ban hemp with THC, Delta-9 THC, and define that as marijuana if it goes over the 0.3% threshold. But it would allow for a synthetically derived cannabinoid that is 2 or 3 times stronger and more intoxicating than natural marijuana, because they use the word all. And then that's where it gets into this argument that you could say that the definition of hemp is unconstitutionally vague because it is blending two things. There is the USDA and then there's the FDA. The USDA is what you would use for defining corn, let's say. How is corn defined? Well, I'm glad you asked. Corn. Corn is a grain that consists of 50% or more of whole kernels of shelled dent corn and or shelled flint corn. And then they have the zeameas. You kind of do that in the definition of hemp. They talk about cannabis sativa L, and not more than 10% of other grains. Still, you know what they don't define here in corn? They don't define all extracts, derivatives of extracts, salts, isomers of salts. And then it would be interesting if they had ethanol as one of them, because ethanol can be derived from corn. You take corn, you crack it, you throw some yeast in it, you boil it into a mash. It turns the starches into sugars, which the yeast starts to eat, and then they poop out ethyl alcohol. So in theory, it would be a derivative. Whiskey would be derivatives of corn under the current definition of hemp, if we were using that as equivalence. Because of the way hemp is defined, hemp is defined beyond the traditional definitions of USDA products. For example, the definition of corn that we just looked at. Let's go over broken corn, because there's many different types of corn. Broken corn, all matter that passes readily through a 12/16 round hole sieve and over a 6/64 round hole sieve, according to procedures prescribed by FGIS instructions. Now, granted, that corn still has to be 50% or more of whole kernels of corn and 10% or less of a different grain, which is fascinating that corn really doesn't have to be corn. You know what corn syrup has to be, though? That is something else. And I want you to understand this, because this is where you see the difference. If you zoom into it, you see right here, it's about Title 21, Food and Drugs. And then Chapter 1, Food and Drug Administration. Right. You know where the definition of hemp ain't? In Title 21, Food and Drugs, or the Food and Drug Administration. So the FDA is telling the people in the hemp regulatory aspect, you need to tell us how to regulate this new product that you've invented. And then you did such a bad job of defining. You took the FDA and the USDA and you smushed them together in a definition of hemp. So much so that, again, now we can go back to the definition of corn syrup. Corn syrup is commonly called glucose syrup, or glucose syrup is obtained by a partial hydrolysis of cornstarch with safe and suitable acids or enzymes. It may also occur in dehydrogenation or dehydrated glucose syrup. Depending on the degree of hydrolysis, corn syrup may contain, in addition to glucose, maltose, and higher saccharides. Look at that. Look how different that is than, the definition of corn under the United States Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Marketing Service. Did you know that the Agricultural Marketing Act is where the definition of hemp is? Okay, and so now you see how corn as an agricultural commodity is defined over here in this particular federal law that was pursuant to the USDA, and then corn syrup is defined over here in the Food and Drug Act's aspect of the federal laws. And that's what the FDA means when they talk about you needing to regulate, Congress, this new IHD, their intoxicating hemp derivative, that you've created by creating a definition of hemp that is so broad and vague, you don't know how a reasonable person's supposed to put it together, because you have a definition that allows for intoxicating hemp-derived cannabinoids like THCP, HHC, THCO, Delta 8, Delta 10, Delta 9, and THCA. That is very often beyond the bounds of how you define an agricultural commodity. The USDA is only paying attention to the cultivation. All the downstream products, they don't exist. And therefore, they are adulterated food in violation of federal law, and they're not legal. You're still going to keep selling them, maybe because hemp didn't legalize weed. You're legalizing weed when you vote in Florida, or when you voted in Missouri, or when we voted here in Illinois and we created one of the best legal marijuana programs in the country. Let me expand on why I said that. And so we are now going to share the new administrative code. This just came out in Illinois over this past week. They have created a comprehensive regulatory scheme that shuts down all the chicanery that happens in the social equity licensing lottery process. A lot of the predatory practices are now, for all intents and purposes, gone from these new definitions of financial interest to the ability of the license holder to at any time back out of the sale of his license. It's fascinating how they've created these. It's not that I hate hemp. Hemp is rope, not dope. I hope that you can smoke some dope, some natural cannabis. And with that, we wrap this up. I don't agree with the Fourth Circuit. I don't agree with the Ninth Circuit. I don't think that Delta 8 THC is legal. I don't think that THCO is legal. I don't think that any intoxicating hemp derived, any IHD is legal, because they all are intended for human consumption, and therefore they're all adulterated food products in violation of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which, by the way, is a crime. Unfortunately, the FDA is in charge of enforcing that crime. They send out warning letters, but nobody usually gets arrested. And that's why Missouri's ban is legal. And that lawsuit that's been filed by the hemp industry down in Missouri should fail. There's also the charge under the federal law that allows the state to make more stringent definitions of hemp. However, now you know, the more you know, man, the more you know. And so if you want to learn more about that, you can visit me over at cannabisindustrylawyer.com and click our Can I Help You button and get our free white paper that I'm still writing, not quite done with. It'll be there by the time we get 5 more leads or so. That explains why so many people are applying for dispensary licenses. Did you know that there was over 4,000 applications for a dispensary in the state of Kentucky? Dang it. Giving out 48, there's over 4,000 applications. You know who wins? The state of Kentucky. They made $27.7 million cool dollars by having this application round. They are going to be making natural marijuana. Granted, some of it will be considered hemp because of the THC levels, as they're only looking at Delta 9 and not total THC. I anticipate that's going to be changed. And so if you are too, click those likes, leave it to me in the comments. Let me know what you think of my opinions, because, I kind of do like stirring the pot a little bit on LinkedIn, a little too much. I could have worked on other good things and maybe watched another quarter of the Bears game, but they did end up winning. Our lead story before we get out of here was, is THCO legal according to a Fourth Circuit case regarding somebody who was fired for drug use, who said it was not drugs, it was hemp. They think it is. And I find that to be highly suspect for the reasons that we discussed. Several of them are constitutional in nature. The court would not want to rule on those if it could avoid it. They would instead find that because the FDA has no rules governing how hemp can be consumed, and that's inhalation or ingestion, so by humans, that you would need some type of GRAS status for it to not be considered an adulterated product, which is invading our food supply. And if you read the stuff that happened in Missouri, a lot of the executive order echoed that particular aspect, because they really kind of had a good lawyer that looked into it. That's one of the nice things about state lawyers. And they've been fighting the fight for the state for a while. The regulatory authority is not a novel thing. They do get to learn a lot of administrative law firsthand. You can meet a lot of good lawyers that work for the state. That's why when I read that stuff from Missouri, I'm like, yeah, I bet they're able to do it. And then I see this THCO thing out of the Fourth Circuit, and I'm like, it's a bad decision. And then I look at how adulterated food is defined, and that there's no regulations. And then after that, you have the ability of the DEA, because the only thing Congress did was a really clunky, ugly, overly vague, broad definition of hemp, because you're taking the USDA, that's corn, and the FDA, that's corn syrup, and you're smushing them together, which makes it really difficult. You imagine if corn was corn syrup. Either way, the court that's reviewing that challenge to the vagueness of the definition of hemp probably is not going to side with you, especially if they can avoid it by saying, you're right, there are no regulations. And you're also right, the Chevron doctrine no longer exists. So the FDA that would actually be writing those regulations has less authority to do so. Congress needs to act. And so until Congress acts, what you're selling, Mr. Hemp Peddler, is illegal federally. Welcome to it. You're just lucky it ain't Schedule 1, so you don't have to play by the rules or get taxed like we do. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget likes, subscribes. Tune in. I'll have more for you next week. Maybe you'll be back next week, and there'll be more cannabis legalization news. Stay tuned, everybody.